The prairie was dying gold under the last breath of sun when she appeared, just a dust-bitten shadow at first, clinging to a swayback mare that limped beneath her. The horse's ribs showed like hunger, and its eyes rolled white with exhaustion, but it pressed on through the tall whispering grass as if it, too, knew this was the end of something. Cradled against the woman's chest was a boy, no more than 8, wrapped in a threadbare quilt the color of dried blood. His head lolled back with the loose weight of fever, and now and then, a tremor passed through his limbs like wind through paper. The woman, who once had the glow of June in her cheeks, now wore dust and grief in equal measure. Her name was Evelyn Grace Cartwright, though most in the town hadn't spoken it aloud in years. Some said she ran off with a railroad man. Others whispered worse. But none expected her return, least of all with a child in her arms and death riding close behind. She didn't head for town. She knew better. Town was where whispers stuck like burrs and a woman's name could be ruined faster than rain could dry. No, she turned her tired horse north, where fences marked a land that no one dared trespass, the McAllister Ranch. Colt McAllister hadn't been seen in town for 3 years, not since he threw down his doctor's bag and walked out of the saloon without looking back. Rumors clung to him like old blood. Some said he'd killed a man with his bare hands, others that he'd lost a child and buried his heart with it. What they knew for certain was this: he didn't take visitors, didn't speak much, and hadn't fired his revolver since the war, though it still hung, polished and ready, beside his bed. That night, Colt was chopping firewood when the distant rattle of hooves stopped his breath. He straightened slowly, axe still in hand, and narrowed his eyes to the dark shape moving through the mist. His dog, Boone, growled low beside him, hackles twitching. Colt set the axe down, not yet alarmed but not at ease either. In these parts, strangers didn't come calling unless trouble was close behind. The mare stumbled once, then fell to its knees just beyond the gate. Evelyn tumbled down with it, one arm wrapped protectively around the child. Colt moved quick, reaching her just as she struggled upright. "Help him," she rasped, voice raw with dust and panic. "Please. He's burning up." She pushed the boy toward him. Colt hesitated. The child's skin was damp and hot, his eyes fluttering beneath half-shut lids. His lips were cracked, breath rattling like dry leaves. Colt's fingers twitched as memories surged unbidden. Another boy, younger, his own blood. A scream in the dark. A fever no remedy could tame. He blinked it away and reached forward, lifting the child gently. His arms remembered before his mind did, the tilt of the head, the support of the neck, the hush needed to calm a dying child. Evelyn staggered behind him, breath ragged. Inside, the house smelled of cedar and tobacco. Colt laid the boy on a worn leather couch near the hearth, pulled an afghan over his legs. He fetched a basin and cloth, then hesitated again. His hands, calloused from ranching, hadn't touched medicine in years. "Name?" he asked finally, low. "Jesse," Evelyn said, sitting on the floor beside the boy, her fingers threading through his damp hair. "He's all I have." Colt said nothing. He dipped the cloth in water and wrung it out, pressing it to Jesse's forehead. The boy moaned softly. "I thought you were in Kansas," he said after a while, not looking at her. "Was. Things fell apart." He nodded. The fire crackled between them, casting orange shadows over Jesse's still face. "How long's he been burning?" he asked. 2 days. Her voice shook. "Couldn't find no one to take him. They wouldn't let me through the church doors. Not even for prayer." Colt's jaw tightened. He opened a nearby cabinet, pulling down a box covered in dust. Inside was an old doctor's satchel, the leather cracked but the tools clean. He paused before opening it. "I'm not a doctor anymore," he muttered. "You are tonight," Evelyn whispered. That was how it began. No apology, no explanation, just a sick boy, a desperate mother, and a man trying to forget who he used to be. Colt worked through the night, checking Jesse's pulse, examining the rash along his ribs, listening to his breathing. Boone lay curled in the corner, watching every movement. Evelyn stayed close, eyes wide and pleading. She did not cry. Not once. She just sat still, hands clenched in her skirt, flinching at every cough. In town, gossip traveled faster than horses. By morning, folks at Nettie Bloom's bakery were already whispering. "She showed up like a ghost," one woman said, slicing dough. "Right to McAllister's door. No shame. Course she'd go there," another sneered. "One outlaw seeks another." Sheriff Amos Ridge, long-faced and stiff as a fence post, heard the talk too. He knew Evelyn once, knew her before she'd gone and left him with a ring he never gave. He wasn't one for gossip, but something about her return stirred his pride like dust in a storm. Back at the ranch, Colt wiped sweat from his brow. Jesse had stabilized some, but the fever still lingered like a predator just beyond reach. "You'll need to stay," he told Evelyn without looking at her. She nodded. She didn't ask how long. Colt cleared the spare bedroom, made a pallet on the floor for Jesse. Evelyn slept in the chair by the bed, boots still on. Every few hours, Colt brought water, soup, herbs. He spoke little, only what was necessary. On the third night, Jesse seized. His limbs jerked violently, eyes rolled back. Evelyn screamed, clutching him, but Colt moved fast, steady. He cradled the boy and whispered calm, his voice like wind through cottonwood. Afterward, Jesse went limp, breath shallow. "He's getting worse," Evelyn whispered, eyes hollow. Colt didn't reply. He sat by the boy for hours, jaw tight, knuckles white. That evening, Evelyn stepped outside. The sky was bruised with dusk, stars beginning to blink above the hills. She watched the wind stir the wheat and listened to the hush of night animals waking. The air smelled of earth and pine and something else, something old and broken in her bones. Colt joined her quietly. "You're angry with me," she said without turning. He looked at her, the lines around his eyes deepening. "I don't got room to be angry." She swallowed hard. "I didn't come back for pity. I didn't offer any." They stood in silence, shoulder to shoulder, not touching. "Why did you stop?" she asked finally. Colt's voice was gravel and regret. "I tried to save someone. Didn't work. I broke something that wouldn't fix." She turned to him, eyes shining. "Then maybe saving Jesse ain't just for him." His breath caught, then he looked away. Later, she found a bowl of stew waiting on the table. 2 spoons beside it. The next morning, Jesse opened his eyes for the first time in days. Evelyn sobbed quietly, clutching his small hand to her cheek. Colt stood at the doorway, the first light of dawn behind him. He didn't smile, but something eased in his shoulders. Outside, the wind shifted. The mare grazed, no longer trembling. The prairie held its breath. And somewhere in town, a bell rang, soft and uncertain, like hope learning how to walk again. Jesse's eyes, though open, were dull with fever, 2 dimmed lanterns flickering low in the wind. He spoke little, murmured less. Colt knelt beside him, brushing the boy's damp curls back with the side of his calloused hand, searching for signs that the worst had passed. But healing, he knew, didn't move in straight lines. It looped and dipped and sometimes vanished like water into sand. The room smelled of crushed herbs and wood smoke, heavy with breathless waiting. Evelyn sat in the corner, watching every movement with silent desperation, her shoulders tight, her fingers worrying the edge of her skirt. Colt had seen mothers like her during the war, wrung out, half-starved for hope, brittle with the weight of their child's body in their arms. "I need wild willow bark," Colt said at last. "The fresh kind, from the creek bed." Evelyn was already on her feet. "I'll go. It's near the ridge," he warned. "Coyotes run close after dusk. I'm not scared." She left with a rifle slung over her shoulder and a pouch swinging at her hip. Colt watched her until the dust settled behind her boots. She moved like a woman who knew the land, but whose heart was already rooted elsewhere, in a bed with fever and a boy's breath skipping like pebbles across still water. Colt turned back to Jesse. The child was small for his age, skin too thin, bones pressing against the skin like they were trying to escape. He made a soft, broken sound in his sleep, something between a whimper and a memory. Colt dipped a cloth in cool water and laid it over the boy's chest. As he worked, the room seemed to shrink, drawn in by the boy's labored breathing and the weight of silence. Outside, the wind had shifted. Summer was drawing to its end, but the air held the heat like a grudge. Clouds hung low and still, promising nothing but waiting. Evelyn returned near dusk, face scratched from brush, but her pouch full. She dropped it on the table, breath ragged. "Boil it." "Quick," Colt said, already grinding another herb. She moved beside him without question. For a moment their hands touched, fumbling over the same glass jar. The contact was brief, but something passed between them, something wordless and warm, like a match catching light just before the flame. That night, Jesse worsened. His body jerked again, harder this time, and his skin flushed an angry red. He mumbled nonsense, fragments of dreams stitched with fever. Colt pressed his palm to the boy's chest, heart galloping beneath his ribs. "We're running out of time," he muttered. Evelyn stood behind him, arms wrapped around herself. "Tell me what to do. I need to bring his fever down. Shock his system." He hesitated, eyes flicking toward the door. "The creek's cold this time of night. It's a risk. Will it save him?" Colt looked at her, truly looked. She wasn't begging. She wasn't pleading. She was offering up everything she had, which was only the boy, and maybe her own strength. "It might." She nodded once. "Then do it." They wrapped Jesse in thick blankets soaked in cool water, and Colt carried him out into the night. The stars blinked above them like old eyes, and the moon, nearly full, watched in silence. The walk to the creek was long, down a sloping path flanked by whispering grass and the occasional scatter of stones. Evelyn walked beside him, holding a lantern that cast long shadows. When they reached the bank, Colt knelt, letting the icy water run over his hands. Then, carefully, he dipped Jesse in, just his back, just enough to jolt the body. The boy gasped weakly. His eyelids fluttered. "Hold on, Jesse," Colt murmured. "You stay with me now." The water took the heat from the boy's skin. Steam rose from his shoulders. Evelyn knelt behind them, shaking. Not from cold, but from faith, fragile, bruised faith that this man who once turned from healing could somehow bring her son back. Minutes passed. Then the boy stilled, and for one terrifying heartbeat, he went completely limp. Colt held him tighter, whispering, rocking gently. Evelyn moved closer, her hand resting on Jesse's head. And then, a breath. Shallow, but real. Another. The boy coughed, weak but steady. They pulled him from the water, wrapped him tight, and hurried back up the trail. The air smelled sharper now, cleaner, as though something had been lifted from the land itself. Colt carried the boy close, his expression carved from stone, but his eyes glistened under the silver light. By the time they reached the house, dawn was a smudge on the horizon. Evelyn placed Jesse in bed and tucked the blanket under his chin with shaking hands. He was sleeping deeply, the fever broken. Colt stood over them both, wet to the knees, shivering but still. "You saved him," she said, her voice like a prayer unraveling. He didn't answer, only turned and walked toward the kitchen. Moments later, she followed. He stood by the stove, stirring something in a pot with a wooden spoon. She watched him from the doorway. "Why'd you help us?" she asked quietly. He kept stirring. "Didn't know I was going to." She stepped inside. "I don't expect anything. I needed someone to care." "I didn't care," he said, but not cruelly. He turned then, met her eyes. Not at first. Their gaze held. Evelyn stepped closer. She reached out, then pulled her hand back. Instead, she sat across from him at the table. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The wind blew softly through a crack in the window. Somewhere outside, Boone barked once and went quiet. They ate stew in silence. At midday, word reached town. Nettie Bloom, who never missed a thing, had seen Evelyn returning from the creek, soaked to the waist, Colt behind her carrying the boy like a wounded soldier. The gossip lit like fire in dry grass. "She's back for good." He took her in. "That child ain't his. He's playing doctor again." By sunset, Sheriff Amos Ridge was saddling his horse. He arrived at the McAllister ranch just as the day began to die. His boots crunched on the gravel path, and his badge caught the orange glow like a threat. Boone growled low, but Colt stepped out before the dog could move. The two men stood a few feet apart, the air between them thick with things unsaid. "She here?" Amos asked. "She is. You gonna let me see her?" "No. She got no right hiding from the law." "She ain't hiding. She stole that boy." Colt's face didn't change. "He's hers." "That's not what I heard." Colt stepped closer. "What you heard is wind." Amos's jaw tightened. He looked past Colt toward the house. A curtain moved. "You forget who you were, McAllister? You think playing healer again makes you something new?" "I didn't forget," Colt said. "That's why I ain't the one with the badge." The silence stretched. Finally, Amos tipped his hat. "You got 2 days. After that, I need something official." Colt didn't respond. The sheriff turned and rode out. Evelyn stepped onto the porch behind him, arms folded tight around herself. "He won't stop," she said. "No," Colt agreed. "But I won't either." That night, Jesse's fever did not return. Evelyn tucked him in with quiet hands, then stood for a long time at the window, staring at the stars. She didn't cry. She simply breathed, long and deep, as if learning how all over again. Colt sat by the fire, eyes half closed. The warmth settled over them both, fragile and real. When Evelyn finally turned, she carried a blanket in her arms and laid it gently over his shoulders. He looked up at her, surprised. "I figured you'd need it more than me," she said, almost smiling. Then she walked back to Jesse's room, her footsteps soft as forgiveness. Outside, the prairie slept. The boy lived. And something in the old house began, quietly, to heal. The scent of fresh bread drifted from the kitchen, laced with rosemary and memory. Morning light filtered through the window slats in long golden shafts, and for the first time in weeks, the McAllister house didn't feel like a place waiting for bad news. It felt, softly and strangely, like a home. Colt sat at the table, sleeves rolled, palms still dusted with flour. Evelyn moved around him barefoot, her braid loose down her back, humming something he almost recognized but didn't dare ask about. Jesse was up. Weak, thin, but grinning lopsidedly as he sat propped on the sofa wrapped in blankets, watching the sun creep across the wood floor like it was a miracle. Boone lay beside him, head resting on the boy's lap, tail thumping lazily now and then. "Thought I died," Jesse muttered, voice rasped with recovery. "You didn't," Colt said, folding his arms. "I know. I can still smell your cooking." Evelyn laughed behind her hand, and something in Colt's chest stirred. He turned away to pour coffee, but his hand trembled slightly. It wasn't the boy's humor that rattled him. It was the way Evelyn looked at him now, not with fear or regret, but with something gentle and steady. Like forgiveness wrapped in wool. They ate in near silence, broken only by Jessie's occasional questions and Boone's low sighs. Evelyn served them both, sliding warm slices of bread across the table, setting out honey in a chipped porcelain dish like she'd done it 100 times before. The simplicity of it all, the morning light, the boy's smile, the smell of something good and earned, was almost too much to hold. But beyond the fields, in the dusty heart of town, the whispers had grown teeth. They spoke her name like it was a crime, said she was hiding from something. That Jessie wasn't hers. That Colt was playing house with a woman who'd shamed a preacher's son and left in the night. And then there was the matter of the sheriff. Amos Ridge had been patient long enough. By noon, Colt heard hoofbeats crunching gravel again. He stepped outside before they even crested the hill. Evelyn followed, jaw tight. Amos came alone this time, badge shining, dust on his boots and a paper in his hand. "You got company," he said without dismounting. "Judge signed this." He held out the paper. "What's it say?" Colt asked, voice level. "Child in question. Questions about custody. I need to take both back into town." Evelyn stepped forward. "You're not taking my son." Amos sighed. "Evie, I don't want to do this, but you got no place to stay, no work, no proof you can raise him. I've kept him alive this long. You ran. You left. That's what folks remember." Colt moved between them. "She didn't run from Jessie. She ran from a town that would have hung her for breathing." "That town is still mine to keep in line," Amos snapped. "And right now, it's restless." "I don't care what the town thinks," Evelyn said, voice trembling now. "They weren't there when Jessie was sick. They didn't help." Colt turned to her slowly. "Then let them see." She blinked at him. "What? Come with me. To town. We'll walk in. No hiding. No shame. You bring Jessie. I'll bring the truth." "You do that," she whispered. He nodded once. They rode in just before dusk. The three of them, Colt on his old roan gelding, Jessie in front of him wrapped in a blue wool blanket, Evelyn beside them on the swayback mare that brought her home. Her spine was straight. Her eyes steady. The whole town seemed to stop when they rode through the square. Nettie Bloom stood in her doorway, apron dusted with flour, mouth slightly open. The blacksmith, old Dwayne, leaned on his hammer and squinted. Even the pastor froze mid-sermon as they passed by the church steps. Colt didn't speak until they reached the sheriff's office. Then he dismounted slowly, helped Evelyn down, then lifted Jessie into her arms. Amos stood waiting by the door, arms crossed. "You want proof?" Colt said, loud enough for those gathered to hear. "This boy is hers. She raised him alone, kept him fed when there was no food, carried him on horseback for miles when he was burning alive. And when no one else would open their door, hell, when you wouldn't, she found me." He stepped closer. "And I did what you wouldn't. I saw a mother. I saw a boy who needed saving." The silence was deep and long. Someone coughed. Then from the back of the small crowd, a voice spoke. "I saw her at the creek," said Nettie Bloom, stepping forward. "Carrying herbs. Wet to the waist. I didn't say nothing then, but she looked like a mother." Others murmured. A few nodded. "She ain't no outlaw," the blacksmith said gruffly. "And that boy's got her eyes." Amos looked around, jaw working. Then slowly, he lowered the paper. "You leave again," he said to Evelyn, "don't come back." "I won't," she replied. "Because I'm staying." He nodded once. "Then we're done here." They turned to go. As they rode back toward the edge of town, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of amber and fire. Evelyn glanced sideways at Colt, her hair stirring in the wind. "I didn't think anyone would stand up for me," she said. He didn't answer for a moment. Then, "I almost didn't." "But you did." He looked at her then, really looked, at the strength behind her weariness, the steel behind her tenderness. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "the second chance ain't for the one asking. It's for the one giving." They rode on in silence. At the ranch, the night settled around them like a blanket. Jessie curled in bed, breath steady and slow. Evelyn sat on the porch, knees pulled to her chest, eyes on the stars. Colt joined her, a mug of coffee in each hand. They didn't speak right away. Just listened to the wind. The chirp of insects. The distant call of a coyote. "I still don't know what tomorrow looks like," Evelyn said finally. "Neither do I," Colt replied. "But I think I want to find out." She turned her face to his, the porch lamp casting soft gold across her cheek. He reached for her hand, not to pull her close, not to claim anything, but just to hold it. Warmth passed between them. No grand declarations. Just the quiet promise of presence. The prairie stretched wide and silent around them. Above, the stars blinked on one by one like old friends returning after a long absence. And beneath that sky, under the soft breath of wind and healing, something settled into place, not loud, not sudden, but right. So if you ever find yourself lost, stumbling through shame or silence, if you feel the world has already made up its mind about you, remember this: sometimes grace doesn't come in thunder or fire. It comes in the hands of a rancher who forgot how to heal, and a mother who never stopped trying. Sometimes it comes with bread, and a boy's laughter. And sometimes, it's just enough to keep going.